So here we are, at the very end. Finales of such have a lot riding on them, don't they? Whether it be a final book, a final movie, or the final installment in a video essay series. Well, maybe not that last one. But hey, I've now made a cumulative amount of 89 minutes in total by working on these reviews. And that's not even counting however long this final video will be. I don't even know at the time of writing or recording this. It's honestly up to you to do the math. But even though I should be exhausted after all of that work I've done this summer, I'm still excited to talk to you about the very final installment of this franchise, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 2. First off, Deathly Hallows is such a great title. It gives the viewer or reader a wonderful sense into what is going to come next, a high-stakes and foreboding adventure for all these characters we've grown up loving so much. And it feels appropriately final, everything about this movie does. And I also think that this film is an absolute masterpiece, and one of my all-time favorite movies. This is probably the best ending to a franchise that does not include a ring. Honestly, it wraps up all the plot threads, is entertaining, and even drops some plot twists that are intensely effective for how the series should end. I honestly have always been a sucker for endings to large stories. Good ones, that is. If a finale is something that's been amped up to, comes out, and it's either bad or simply I tend to hate it more than usual. A final entry is when a series shows how truly it will last over time. That isn't just a few good stories. It's a memorable experience that will leave an impression. I think it's safe to say that Harry Potter indeed did. Whether it's old fans like me who grew up with everything, or the young kids about to open their first book, I feel completely comfortable in saying that Harry Potter will still be thought about in a century. Because the final installment gives everyone the perfect, bittersweet feeling that will last. It includes so many great callbacks to previous installments without filling in your face about it. The performances from the entire cast are stellar. The direction is probably the best since Prisoner of Azkaban. I just really can't think of anything that actually bothers me in this film. It's practically perfect. You can nitpick it all you want, but in the grand scale, none of it really matters to me. In fact, I'll go ahead and score this movie right now, and it's a special rating I've only given the 4 other films on my channel in reviews. This movie gets an 11 out of 10. It's an all-time favorite. But of course, I'm not done yet. Not in the slightest. Deathly Hallows Part 1 was a very slow and methodical approach to the first half of the story. Part 2, however, is very much more action-oriented, yet it still never goes overblown with it, and as it knows very well when to take a break just to focus on the character and the story. It's freaking great that way. But yeah, the action sequences in this film are great in a very unique way. They're given an epic quality not just by the visuals alone, but by the score, and not in a generic sense. It's legitimately moving to see this backdrop to so many beloved installments become an outright war zone where everything is being destroyed. I also love that even though the battles themselves are great, it's not always the direct focus, and the movie is constantly centered around more substantial elements beyond the explosive battles, making up a masterful balance. This movie feels triumphantly epic and is probably the best execution of large-scale fantasy battles since Return of the King. The pace for this film is also perfect. After the slow burn of Deathly Hallows Part 1, we get a fast-paced action fantasy movie motivated by character and emotion, and I freaking love it. Just in general, the score in this film is fantastic. With his lack of using Hedwig's theme in Part 1 making sense, Alexandre Desplat's score for this film makes plenty of good use of it throughout the movie. In general, even though I think all the soundtracks have been great, I think this is the best score since John Williams left. We open up with the beautiful piece of music, Lily's theme, which honestly sounds like it could be in a biblical film epic or something. It starts off this movie with the right tone, amping up the overall epic scale we're about to experience. The score played over the war sequences is great because instead of trying to sound cool and badass, it's saddening. I'm of course talking about the masterful tracks Statues and Courtyard Apocalypse.
Pier totum locomotor!
Honestly, this might be my favorite track out of all the soundtracks if this film didn't also remind me of one that I'll get to later. What this final soundtrack did that I really loved is that it never hesitated to bring out a theme prominently from one of the previous composers. This naturally gives the movie an even more powerfully emotional nostalgia, particularly in scenes such as this.
Flying.
Nevel's appearance in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows really demonstrates the most dominant character arc in this entire series. He starts off as a chubby little forgetful bullied kid who is constantly being put down by Draco Malfoy. But bit by bit, as you find more about him, the character becomes immensely interesting, particularly when you discover what happens to his parents. And of course, the reveal that sadly isn't in the movies, that he was one of 2 possible children mentioned in the prophecy. Of course, the movies did their part by giving a couple of Dobby's old plot elements to Nevel so that he has more of a running role in the story. And by Deathly Hallows Part 2, he's completely changed into a badass. He resisted the Carrow's cruel reign over Hogwarts while Harry was on the run. He started Dumbledore's army going once more, and of course, he is the one who gets the big speech when all is thought to be lost, ultimately destroying the final Horcrux. That's development right there, a dynamic character, and I love it.
They didn't die in vain. But you will, because you're wrong. Harry's heart did beat for us. For all of us. It's not over.
Now we get to really is probably the most complex and most intriguing character in this entire series. Snape. When we had left him off, Snape was just a murdering traitor that everyone pretty much just hated. But in here, we find everything that J.K. Rowling had been holding back for 7 installments. The sequence inside Snape's memory is simply gorgeous, and some damn perfect editing. The way it reveals all of the complexities that have been brewing under this character for so long is immaculately paced, cutting between footage from earlier films and new material that absolutely shatters the heart. Of course, I feel that some people get too much out of this. Snape is not automatically a perfect human just because he had a deep love for Harry's mom and suffered through the friend zone. He's still a horrible, bullying dickhead of a teacher. Seriously, he was the main one keeping Nevel down. But what this does is show certain nuances to the character that make him probably the most complex character in this entire series. He's not my favorite, but he's definitely one of the best written and intriguing. And holy hell, does Alan Rickman sell the hell out of it. His subdued yet explosively emotional performance in here is heartbreaking, particularly with his delivery of just a single word.
Lily? After all this time? Always.
Of course, through that incredible sequence, we discover the greatest reveal of all, that Harry was a Horcrux this entire time. This is the perfect kind of 11th hour reveal for a long-running story to have. A finale should have something shocking that ups the ante. And I distinctly remember being convinced that Harry was about to die reading this book, that there was no other way for this to end. And that's the great thing about reading books. There's no awful trailers that spoil everything. But yeah, it's not the sort of twist I hate based off of mere subversion and shock value. It's based off of something that has been genuinely built on from the start, that ultimately makes so many questions clear, that gives this story the finality it desperately needed. It shows why his scar stings, why he has a mental connection with Voldemort, why he can speak to snakes. It's the perfect dramatic topping off of everything we already know. But that's not just it. Remember when I argued that Chamber Secrets was a much more vitally important and underrated installment in this entire franchise? Well, it represented the first time Harry truly showed the ability to accept death, when he first showed he could truly be a sacrificial hero. This ultimately is what gives him the power to face Voldemort. It isn't a magical extra life like some have complained about, and even if that is true, it's not really about that in the end. It's the very fact that he's willing to die if it means he can defeat the greater evil. Voldemort's greatest weakness is his fear of death, that he believed nothing is worse and he would never become powerful without splitting himself into the most immortal being possible. But Harry's connection to loved ones in the afterlife, that he has people he can call back using the Resurrection Stone, is what's most impactful in his fight. It assures him that even if he dies, there's still people who love him that are waiting beyond the veil. That's what makes this movie so intensely emotionally resonant. The ultimate themes of love, death, and the sacrifice that must come with them are here in full force. You could argue that these themes are simplistic, but the story itself makes these ideas complex and well realized.
Does it hurt? Dying.
Quicker than falling asleep.
You'll stay with me.
Until the end.
And he won't be able to see you.
No. We're here, you see.
Dumbledore, too, is a complex character revealed throughout this film. But even though he may have evils in his past, he showed he could grow past them. Came for his time to die, he went through with it. Voldemort is a villain because of fear of dying, and that's why his physical representation is a shriveled fetus. It's because of Harry's ability to love that he has this power. The love for the ones that Voldemort has struck down before him, and his love for the ones he is trying to give a fighting chance. I adore the final conversation between Harry and Dumbledore with all that it reveals, particularly with the final line that just lays emphasis on sometimes the things we cannot define are what is most important.
Professor? Is this all real? Or is it just happening inside my head?
Of course it's happening inside your head, Harry. Why should that mean that it's not real?
You can hate Harry Potter for whatever reason, but you can never tell me that there's no genuine themes and worth to them. J.K. put genuine effort to make sure these stories meant more than just magic, fun, school narratives. They've represented something greater from the very start. Of course, after Harry is presumed dead, we get the big moment where Neville gives his speech, and then the big final battle begins. Neville chops up the snakes, Molly kills the bitch, and Harry fights Voldy. I did hear complaints that they should have stuck to the very simple conversation and then a single exchange of spells from the book. I'm sorry, that's just not going to translate as a finale to a huge franchise. Not everyone will have read the book, you need a finale, and if the movie had just gone exactly what the novel did, it would have felt anticlimactic. And I think the movie did a great job incorporating the conversation throughout the final battle. We still get the necessary exposition about how Harry now has the Elder Wand, it's just dragged out over a more extensive battle. This just helps it feel more intense and yet is still very, very much effective. The changes to the story feel entirely justifiable in an adaptation sense, and man, is it beautifully satisfactory. Harry Potter is always going to be important to me. That's just an everlasting fact. I'm never going to feel as intensely nostalgic for anything as much as I do this franchise. I may eventually find movies I love better, characters I connect to more in the moment, or worlds I invest in more. But nothing that's connected so intensely to my very fabric of existence of loving popular culture and creativity as Harry Potter. Deathly Hallows Part 2 is one of very few movies I cry out, because it's the ending of a story that's deeply personal to me and something I will forever love. Hell, it ends in the exact way I wanted this series to end, with the 19 years later sequence at King's Cross with Harry and his family played with my favorite piece of music in the series, Farewell to Hogwarts. And that's exactly what I have to do right now. It has to end. I only rewatch these films every 4 years or so, therefore it can be special every time. So for now, I have to say goodbye to all the lovely characters I share this journey with every time I go back to Hogwarts. Hagrid, Hermione, Dumbledore, Ron, and most of all, Harry. I just know that every time I can go back and love this entire story with all the characters over and over again. Whatever shit is going on in my life at the time, I just have to revisit, and magically, all will be well.